It surprised nobody that my first job was right next to Fuddruckers, home of the best chicken sandwich ever, the Chicken Bacon Swiss, known at some locations as the Chicken Club. Next door, just for feet, was the newest shoe store in Orlando. It had a basketball court inside of it, they threw money from the rooftop at the grand opening, the local newspaper was there, it was a big deal. It didn't take long, I only worked there for 1 week, to figure out that my job was mainly to run around the warehouse looking for whatever shoes people wanted to try on. So one night, a kid, probably 10 or 11 years old, came into the store with his mother. He told me the shoe he wanted, he told me his size, and I did my job. I ran and got them. I took the first shoe out of the box, removed the stuffing from inside, loosened the laces, you know the drill, and handed it to the kid. Then did the same with the second shoe. The kid put them on and tied them up. After he walked around a bit, I asked him how they felt. I don't recall his answer though, or if he even answered. All I remember is what happened next. There was this brief awkward silence, the three of us standing there, staring at each other like nobody was sure what was supposed to happen next. That's when the kid looked at me so innocently and asked, "Aren't you gonna do the test?" I'm thinking, the test? What's this kid talking about? Then it dawned on me. Oh, he thinks I'm the shoe expert, a master of shoes. In his head, I know everything about shoes and the human foot. He wants me to get on my hands and knees, touch my thumb to his big toe, then squeeze the sides of the shoes to tell him if they fit or not. He wants my expert opinion. He wants me to do the shoe test. So what did I do? I did the shoe test, of course. I got down on my hands and knees, pressed my thumb to his big toe, squeezed the sides, the whole time trying not to bust out laughing. When I was done performing my thorough examination, I stood up and confidently told him, "Yup, feel good to me." They bought the shoes. Why are we like that? I can't be certain what the kid and his mom were thinking or how the shoes really felt, but it sure seems like they both gave me automatic credibility because of my position of authority. I was a shoe expert because I was the guy who worked at the shoe store. Why are we like that? The moment I realized what role they expected me to play, I played it. And I knew exactly what role they wanted me to play and how to play it because I saw the shoe guy do the shoe test a million times when I was growing up. Monkey see, monkey do. Now I'll assume the shoes fit that kid fine, but it's not hard to imagine him coming home from school the next day with blisters on his feet or pain in his toes. He thought the shoes felt a little tight or a little loose the night before at the store, but what does he know? The shoe expert said they were fine. Hola, my name's Jordan and I make Spanish videos, but lately not that many, mainly because about 18 months ago I fell into a hole, a grammar hole. I first started to learn Spanish on my own while studying abroad in the Netherlands for my last semester in college, almost 20 years ago. I found myself living in a dorm with a bunch of Spanish people and took advantage of the situation. During that 6 months, in addition to hanging out almost entirely with the Spanish contingent, I really hit the grammar books hard, all day, every day. But after that, I never really looked at the grammar again. Sure, here and there, and I even did a week or month in several of those immersion schools they have in most Spanish-speaking countries. But for the most part, after that semester in the Netherlands, most of my Spanish has come from traveling in both Spain and Latin America, from talking to people, reading newspapers, magazines, listening to music, and writing down the lyrics and singing the songs. I always knew that if I went back to the grammar with fresh eyes, I'd get so much more out of it, but I never did. Until about 18 months ago. That's when I started answering questions from students directly in a Facebook group, not accepting new members at the moment. Until then, to make my videos, I picked a topic that had confused me originally but doesn't anymore, and presented that topic to you the way I would have wanted it presented to me, in a way that wouldn't have confused me. So in that Facebook group, for the first time, I wasn't picking the topics, they were, and they were asking me some pretty tricky questions, many of which I couldn't answer, and others I knew I didn't answer very well, I could tell from their reply. I even hired native Spanish speaker after native Spanish speaker to help me in there, but each time it soon became clear they didn't really know how to answer the tough questions either, not accurately at least. That's when I fell into the grammar hole. Last year, after almost 20 years, I was forced to go back to the grammar books. The questions I couldn't answer forced me there, and once I got there, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In this video, I'm gonna give you the big picture aerial view of everything I saw. But before we continue, a friendly warning. This shouldn't be considered one of those safe places. This is a real place, and even though it might seem otherwise at times, this video is about you and me as much as it's about teachers. And in the end, we're all teachers. What I'm saying is, there's a good chance that at some point in this video, I'm gonna say something you don't love to hear, or worse, something that doesn't match your current views, maybe even something you deem to be ugly, mean, or negative. If you decide to continue, I ask that you keep an open mind and remember, what we're used to usually seems normal or right, and what we're not used to seems weird or wrong. But that's crazy, it's just what we're used to or not used to. My goal here is simple, I want you to choose me. At the end of this video, you'll be faced with a choice, the Spanish authorities' world or my world. I want you to choose mine. In the next video, it's back to the shorter, focused Spanish quickies, I promise, starting with the very basics, the building blocks of a sentence, the parts of speech. After that, I'll show you how those parts of speech work together to form phrases, clauses, and sentences. If I were you right now, I'd be like, oh no, I hate that stuff. I don't like reading the instructions for electronics or when I'm building furniture unless I absolutely have to. And in general, I don't like nomenclature that makes no sense, and I don't like theory that doesn't apply to real life. But even after 20 years of learning Spanish and 5 years of making these videos, I see even the parts of speech differently now than I did 18 months ago. Like verbs. Most of the words we think are verbs aren't really verbs. They don't represent an action, which is what verbs are, right? And all this stuff I'm going to be showing you, I only noticed it in the first place because it helped me understand what was going on in a sentence that had confused me. The fact that we don't even know the basics, we don't even know what the parts of speech really are or what they really do, is a huge part of the reason the more complex sentences and topics can be so confusing. That's why, like I said, starting with the next video, it's back to the Spanish quickies. First, the parts of speech, the building blocks of language, then phrases, clauses, and sentences. In my world, I'll build a strong foundation for you. So after that, when we take a look at all the big issues, ser versus a star, preterite versus imperfect, por versus para, the subjunctive, with fresh eyes, it'll be easier for me to explain and for you to understand exactly what's going on with each. Even the big issues I've already covered, I'm gonna cover again. I see everything at least a little differently now. So if you're a total beginner, consider yourself lucky. This video is non-stop information I wish somebody had told me 20 years ago, before I wasted so much of my time spinning my wheels and wondering why. I'll be speaking English the whole time and using English examples to get most of my points across. I'll use Spanish examples mostly to reinforce an idea or to reinforce the English examples. We are going to cover a lot of ground in this video though and move pretty fast. Please don't freak out if you don't understand everything or don't understand something perfectly. Just because you don't get one point doesn't mean you won't get the next point. And try not to let your mind get too bogged down in the details. Focus more on the main idea of what I'm saying. This video is primarily about the main ideas. Then in the next video, we'll start from the beginning and take it slowly, step by step by step. If you're not a total beginner, great, even better. The more you've already encountered these hurdles and questions, the more you'll get out of this video. Because the more you'll already know, the struggle is real. Okay, here's the deal. When I took a closer look at the grammar books, and I looked at a lot of them, when I think back to how my Spanish teachers taught grammar, when I go through the websites and read the forums, I can't help but to think, wow, our teachers either don't believe what the book says and what they repeat to us, or they simply don't understand how the language they teach works. I know that sounds crazy, which is why I'm making this video, but I'm not saying everything they tell us is wrong. They're fine with the whats. When they show us a certain conjugation pattern or tell us what the direct object pronouns are, of course, they're not wrong about that kind of thing. They know the mechanics. The whys is where they fall short. When we're confused, when we ask a question, when we ask why, that's where things get ugly. Basically, whenever there's any thinking or logic involved, their view of things is nothing short of delusional. I hate that the word delusional is so overused these days, but when somebody sees something that's not really there or doesn't see something that is really there, that's delusion, right? Yeah, I mean it literally. The Spanish authorities' view of the world is inconsistent, it's convoluted, and it relies on magic. Call that whatever you want. So here we go. This video is context for the next videos. It's me presenting my case. I'm presenting my world to you. So when you're ready, you can go out into your world and look around, talk to people, watch movies, read books, listen to music, focus on the words, take them all in with fresh eyes. Then, only when you're ready, I want you to tell me, message me, leave me a comment, tell me, whose world do you live in? Theirs or mine? I started to realize something was amiss when I took a closer look at Lo. I already covered my findings in depth in the video, The Thing About Lo. A link to every video I mention in this video is below this video or in the description. In short, the Spanish authority tells us Lo has so many different meanings. First, they tell us that Lo is a direct object pronoun and means it or him, except in most parts of Spain where Lo only means it. And separately from that, they tell us the word que without the accent means that. Okay, so far so good. But then they don't even tell us this. We just see examples of lo and que together as lo que, and it's translated as what, that which, whatever, whichever, and a bunch of other stuff. And we're like, what? So instead of memorizing or practicing whatever we need to memorize or practice, we waste time asking questions like, how does lo que suddenly mean what? I know que with the accent means what. Does that have anything to do with this? If so, lo just means nothing, then why do we say it? When do we say lo and when don't we? Sadly, we never get an answer to any of these questions. They don't even attempt to explain how this magic works or how the two situations are connected. That, in reality, words don't mean words. Words don't have specific set meanings like we're led to believe. In real life, each word represents some central core idea, or once in a while, ideas. But that creates a problem. The only way we can talk about words is with words. So yeah, the key is to remember there's almost always another way to describe the same word, and there's almost always another word to describe that same idea. That's why to eat, snack, nosh, munch, and nibble could all be translated in Spanish as comer, comer, which just means to eat. Yes, these verbs all do imply a subtly different type of eating, but big picture, they all still mean to eat. There's major overlap between the meanings of all these verbs. They can all be used in the same situation, so they can all mean the same thing. Back to lo now. The central core idea of lo is the thing. That's the idea that lo really represents. Then it and him are just two different ways to say the thing. They're two different translations of the thing. It's easy to see right away with it. I see the thing. These two sentences mean the same thing. Then with him, I know we say that nouns are people, places, and things, but really, people and places are just two specific types of things. We don't normally refer to people as things though, it's not polite, but we are things. I see him, I see the thing. These two sentences mean the same thing. They're two different ways to express the same idea, and manners aside, they could both be said in the same situation. It becomes clearer when we're talking about animals and pets, because the line between them is hazier. We typically refer to an animal that's a pet as him or her, but we normally refer to an animal that's not a pet as it. Our relationship with the animal determines whether we refer to the animal as him and her or it. The difference is only in our minds. Plus, in Spanish, I see it is lo veo, I see him is lo veo, and I see the thing is lo veo. I'm telling you, lo really means the thing, then it and him are just two different translations of the thing, which explains why lo que can mean what, that which, whatever, or whichever, among other things. Since lo means the thing and que, without the accent, means that, logically, lo que really means the thing that. What, that which, whatever, and whichever are all just different ways to say the thing that. They're different translations of the thing that. If you're sitting at a table making something, I could say to you, I like what you're making. I like that which you're making. I like whatever you're making. I like whichever you're making. Or I like the thing that you're making. All these sentences could be said in the same situation. They can all mean the same thing. And in Spanish, they can all be translated the same way. Me gusta lo que haces. No magic involved. Why do they do that? Why do they show us all the different uses of lo, all the different translations of lo, then never show us the context that connects all the different situations logically? I couldn't stop to think about the answers to these questions though. I had other things on my mind. Upon seeing that lo always means the thing, I next set my sights, with fresh eyes, on se, and I reported my findings to you in the videos Se is a monster, monsters aren't real, and going on a se hunt. The Spanish authority tells us, oh, there are so many different ses. There's normal reflexive se, reciprocal se, passive se, impersonal se, and at least 2 or 3 more. But again, they don't even attempt to explain or connect all these different ses. They don't tell us that, except sometimes when it's part of a double object pronoun, there's only one se, and it always tells us the same thing. I've refined how I say this since I made those videos, but se always tells us that clause or sentence refers back to the subject at some point in some way. Normal reflexive. What I mean is, when a clause or sentence contains se, either the subject and the direct object both represent the same noun in reality, or the subject and the indirect object both represent the same noun in reality, or the subject and a prepositional object both represent the same noun in reality. And what that means is, se either represents the direct object, se represents the indirect object, or se represents a prepositional object. Regardless though, se represents the same noun in reality as the subject represents. The clause or sentence refers back to the subject at some point in some way. I'll show you examples of what I'm talking about in a few minutes. For now, just know all their different ses are really just normal reflexive se in different situations, in different contexts. In Spanish, they say se every time. It's only the English that changes from situation to situation. Why do they do that? Why do they show us all the different situations se is used in, but never show us the context that connects the different situations logically? Why wouldn't they at least tell us, but really remind us constantly, that even though se does something a little different in each of these situations, it still does the same thing every time? We'd never do that to somebody in real life. If we were teaching a kid about all the different types of fruits, we wouldn't tell them, well kids, there are grapes, strawberries, oranges, peaches, red apples, green apples, yellow apples, and pink apples. That would make it seem like all the different types of apples are completely different fruits, which in a way they are, but in another way they're not, which is the whole point. If we sensed for 1 second that the kids thought red apples and green apples are totally different fruits, like apples and oranges are totally different fruits, we'd feel compelled immediately to help them understand the reality of the situation, that it depends on the context. Yes, red apples and green apples are totally different, but they're also the same. Why would the Spanish authority do that to us with se? Why would they go out of their way to make it it seem like red apples and green apples are completely different fruits, but never point out that they're both still apples. I still had no time for such questions though. My schedule just filled up. With the momentum I had coming from Lo and Se, and with my fresh eyes, it was finally time to tackle the subjunctive, an understanding of which had eluded me for almost 20 years. I shared the highlights of my findings with you in last year's State of the Gringo address. Do you know what the subjunctive is? Obviously, each verb has a set of conjugations in each verb tense. Well, the subjunctive is more than just another verb tense, it's a whole other set of verb tenses. There are the normal verb tenses, then there are the subjunctive verb tenses. Luckily though, there aren't as many subjunctive verb tenses as there are normal verb tenses. So, just like each verb has a set of conjugations in each normal verb tense, each verb also has a set of conjugations in each subjunctive verb tense. But memorizing all the new conjugations isn't the hard part, or it's not the hardest part. The hardest part is deciding when to use the subjunctive and when not to, when to use a normal verb conjugation in a particular sentence, and when to use a subjunctive verb conjugation. The Spanish authority tells us, oh, the subjunctive has so many different causes. Then they list all their different causes for us, and to help us remember all their causes, they give us a bunch of acronyms where each letter stands for a cause or causes, the most common of which is probably weirdo. They also go on and on about these so-called triggers, words and phrases they claim trigger the subjunctive, just another word for cause basically. But surprise, surprise, never once do they even try to connect all their different causes and triggers logically. The problem is, it all makes sense when we see their simple, hand-picked examples in the book or in class, but the second we hit the real world, it all falls apart. They tell us that emotions and doubt cause the subjunctive, but then we see sentences all over the place that convey emotion and doubt but don't use the subjunctive. Same with their triggers. We see sentences all the time that contain a word or phrase that supposedly triggers the subjunctive in sentences without the subjunctive. When I finally took a closer look at the subjunctive, I didn't see a bunch of different causes. I saw only one cause, an uncertainty of completion between two clauses. With a rare exception, the subjunctive is only used in sentences with two clauses or more, two verbs or more, and the one true cause of the subjunctive is an uncertainty of completion between those two clauses. So, when the subject in one clause isn't sure or can't be sure that the verb in a second clause will happen, an uncertainty of completion, that verb gets conjugated in the subjunctive. When we're not sure or can't be sure a verb will happen, we conjugate that verb in the subjunctive. In reality, their causes and triggers aren't always causes and triggers, so they're not really causes and triggers. This is one of those correlation doesn't imply causation situations. Their causes and triggers only seem like they're causes and triggers in sentences where there's also an uncertainty of completion between two clauses, the one true cause of the subjunctive. For example, in the weirdo acronym, the W stands for wishes and the R stands for recommendations. They're saying wishes and recommendations cause the subjunctive to be used. And I agree, the subjunctive is used with wishes and recommendations, either most of the time or always even. But that's only because when we wish for something to happen, we can't be sure it'll actually happen, an uncertainty of completion. And when we recommend for somebody to do something, we can't be sure they'll actually do it, an uncertainty of completion. But if we just memorize W for wishes and R for recommendations without understanding the logic of why the subjunctive is really being used, an uncertainty of completion, what about demands, commands, orders, and who knows what else? The subjunctive is usually used with demands, commands, and orders for the same reason. When we demand, command, or order somebody to do something, we can't be sure they'll actually do it, an uncertainty of completion. At least with wishes and recommendations though, we really do use the subjunctive most of the time, if not always. The same can't be said for emotions and doubt, the E and D in weirdo. Again, we see sentences all the time that convey emotion and doubt, some with the subjunctive and some without the subjunctive. I'm happy that you're smiling. I'm happy when you're smiling. Both these multiple clause sentences convey emotion, I'm happy. And they're exactly the same sentence too, aside from the conjunction connecting the two clauses in each sentence, that versus when. In Spanish though, the first example would be translated with the subjunctive, estoy feliz de que estés sonriendo. Estés is a subjunctive conjugation of estar, but the second example would be translated without the subjunctive, estoy feliz cuando estás sonriendo. Estás is a normal conjugation of estar. Both these sentences convey emotion. One uses the subjunctive, but the other doesn't. Emotions don't cause the subjunctive, and neither does doubt. I'm not sure that Jimmy is coming today. I'm not sure if Jimmy is coming today. Again, both these multiple multiple clause sentences convey doubt, I'm not sure, and again, they're exactly the same sentence except for the conjunction connecting the two clauses in each sentence, that versus if. In Spanish though, the first example would be translated with the subjunctive, no estoy seguro de que Jimmy venga hoy. Venga is a subjunctive conjugation of venir, but the second example would be translated without the subjunctive, no estoy seguro si Jimmy viene hoy, or no estoy seguro si Jimmy vendrá hoy. Viene and vendrá are both normal conjugations of venir. Both these sentences convey doubt. One uses the subjunctive, but the other one doesn't. Plain old doubt doesn't cause the subjunctive either. Why do they do that? The way they present their causes and triggers as actually being causes and triggers really messes with our minds. It makes the subjunctive harder to learn, not easier. That's why I'm constantly getting emails like this one. Why does this example use the subjunctive? I thought there always needed to be a trigger word or phrase. I don't see any of those feeling mood words that trigger the subjunctive. And it's not his fault. I used to ask those same questions myself. The Spanish Authority tells us words like esperar or cuando are trigger words, then we see sentences everywhere with esperar and cuando but no subjunctive. Or we see a sentence that contains the subjunctive but no trigger, and we waste our time freaking out about nothing. Now, in their defense, they do sometimes admit that their causes and triggers aren't always causes and triggers, but only once usually, quickly, in passing, then never again. This is one of the most popular and authoritative Spanish websites. I use this website myself on a regular basis. Right away, in the headline, it says words and phrases that trigger the subjunctive or indicative. Then down here, certain words or phrases trigger the use of each mood. They basically repeat the same thing here and here. Then finally, they use the word tend here, but then it's right back to tables of words and phrases that trigger the subjunctive. Same thing again here and here and here. Then they have the audacity to post memes like this one. I saw this on some Facebook teacher page I'm a fan of. Stop saying they didn't teach that in school. Yes, they did. You were talking. Oh, really, the Spanish Authority? Did you tell us that lo always means the thing? Did you tell us that se always does the same thing? Did you tell us that there's only one true cause of the subjunctive? I didn't have time to wait for their answers, though. I had something more important to tend to. I smelled blood in the water. What is learning? I've thought about that question a lot since I started making Spanish videos. Sometime within the first few years, I settled on this definition. Learning is giving context to new information as we encounter it. How does this new information fit in with all the information we've already encountered? How does it contradict it? Learning isn't just memorizing a bunch of independent statements in isolation. Learning is giving context to those statements. Then, at some point, while lost in the grammar hole, I realized something else, something connected to that. Context is reality. And if context is reality, that means a lack of context or missing context is not reality. I mean that in several ways. At the shoe store that night, both the kid and his mother thought that I was a shoe expert because they didn't have enough context. They didn't know the reality of the situation, that this shoe expert had worked there less than a week, and the only training I received on the shoes was how to find them in the warehouse. Lo has so many different meanings. There are so many different ses. The subjunctive has so many different causes. Those are all contextual if-then statements without the context. They're only true when presented with the proper context, that all those different meanings of lo are just different translations of the thing, that all those different ses all tell us the same thing, that their causes are only causes when there's also an uncertainty of completion. The Spanish Authority presents them without their context though. Context is reality, and a lack of context or missing context is not reality. What they tell us about lo, se, and the subjunctive simply doesn't reflect reality. It's weird, aren't they the ones that used to get mad at us in math class for not showing our work? But it's okay for them to tell us that lo goes from meaning it or him and ke goes from meaning that to lo ke meaning what with zero explanation by some sort of magic. Then their default knee-jerk reaction whenever we say you never told us that is it's our fault for not listening. What's wrong with them? Why do they do that? Why are they like that? But wait a second, with se and the subjunctive specifically, looking back, I never understood what the heck they were saying when they were talking about all the different ses or all their subjunctive causes and triggers. I never bought into any of it. At the time, I thought it was my fault. I wasn't patient enough. I wasn't focused enough. But now that I've seen that it's all worthless, that none of it is true, what else have they told us that isn't true? What else did I never buy into? What else has been haunting me for decades? Just then, two words popped into my mind: transitive and intransitive. Oh lordy lordy, game on.